Before you were born, your grandfather decided to leave Galicia and immigrate to Brazil. After the grandfather left, your family lost touch with him. Now, almost half a century later, you decided to go to Brazil and look if you will find some trace of him. How did your parents feel about that? And most important, did you find him?
Well, it was a lot of emotion, because we were told always that he was killed by another musician in Brazil by jealousy. That was a big mystery. It was 1904, and we just lost him. The incredible thing is that when we arrived to Brazil, we find a musician that lived in Rio de Janeiro. In the same period, it was the Belle Époque, the best moment of Brazilian music, when European music became Brazilian with the African influences. And this gentleman, he had a lot of success in the carnival in Rio de Janeiro. He played the same instruments as my grandfather. He had the same name, and in the photos he looks just the same. I think we find him. He died some years after arrival, but he had certainly a second life in Brazil.
Okay, you might not have found him alive, but you found a lot of Galician culture thriving in Brazil. Tell us about that.
Oh yes, of course. In Brazil, many Galicians, like in all Latin America. In fact, the Galicians, we are like the Irish in North America. We are the main emigrant people from Spain to Latin America, no? In our case. But there are much deeper connections than that with Brazil. You know, when the Romans, they arrived to the Iberian Peninsula, they find the Celtic tribes in the northwest of this part of the world, and they call Galaecia all that part. With the fall of the Roman Empire, the Germans, they found a kingdom in the same place, and that kingdom, it was called also Galaecia. In fact, that kingdom, it was in the actual Galicia and also in the north of Portugal. So in that part of the Iberian Peninsula, a new language was born, the Galician Portuguese language. What happens? That when Galicia becomes part of Spain later, all those common roots were forgotten. But the really amazing thing is that when the Portuguese, they arrived in the 1500 to Brazil, they were still the same Portuguese from the north with that common culture. And the amazing thing is that the first instrument they played in the beach when they arrived to Brazil for the Indians, it was the Galician pipes.
So, there is since centuries a strong connection between Galicia, Portugal and Brazil, and the new album is a comprehensive documentary about it. Because it is such a detailed work, you needed to research and travel to Brazil a lot. What were the highlights of your discovery and research trip?
Well, it's true that Brazil is not just one big country. In Brazil you can find many countries, many cultures with different historical moments. It's like a cathedral with different styles superposed. In Brazil you can find a life, medieval heritage from Europe mixed with the African sense of rhythm, with the Indians kind of feeling of music. And you can hear echoes of Gregorian music, pre-Baroque songs with modal scales, very old guitars, in tune, not to play major or minor chords. No, they play drums like we do in Celtic music. Medieval fiddles, a very old instrument that you cannot find alive in Europe. You find in Brazil, and with a very contemporary sense of music.
Did you find pipers playing gaitas in Brazil, or at least some of your pipe music played on other instruments?
Yes, all through the history of Brazil, we can find many, many pipers. For example, in Rio de Janeiro, we find in the 19th century a lovely picture of a black piper. Or, for example, in Sao Paulo, we find some texts speaking about black pipers playing in trio with harmonies. But what happens? The Brazilian pipes in the 19th century disappears, and it was transformed. But what happens? In the 19th century, the Brazilian bagpipes disappears, and we can find other instruments that took the place of the pipes. The accordion became the new pipes. How they call today the accordion in Brazil? They call gaita. In the south of Brazil, accordion is called gaita. So the new instrument plays the repertoire and the same feeling of the old pipes. This is why, for example, in the northeast of Brazil, we find modern dancing rhythms with melodies, scales, ornamentation, preludes, that certainly it comes from the pipes.
Was it difficult to find Brazilian musicians to participate as guests in the project?
The Brazilian artists, they were very, very, very generous and very happy, because I didn't want to show the typical, topical Brazil for the tourists. They are tired of that. They were very interested in the fact of a European was able to include all the different cultures of Brazil in one album. No? So we have, for example, from Bahia, the biggest star there. He's a black musician, amazing, Carlinhos Brown. He told me that his first job, it was with Galicians, so it was very, very easy to play with him again the Galician pipes and the African drums. Then in the northeast we have Lenine, a big, big pop artist there. And he told me that his grandfather was from Brittany, so he has Breton roots. With Lenine we explored that northeast connection. Then with Adriana Calcañoto, that she's from the south of Brazil, from Porto Alegre, we had a song called Gaita. Attention, a Brazilian song called Gaita from the south. Then in Rio de Janeiro we find all those escolas de samba, you know, the samba schools that remembers a little bit to the Scottish system, no, of lot of organization. So we put together the Beija Flor champion Escola de Samba with Scottish pipers. Really amazing. We have also in Rio de Janeiro all the choro tradition. The choro is like the instrumental samba. So one foot in Europe, another foot in Brazil.
Your album has an extensive booklet giving loads and loads of background information on each track. There is a section where you quote a scientist alleging that the name Brazil is actually of an Irish origin. Why is that, and is this also the reason the chieftains were invited to guest on one of the tracks?
Well, the chieftains told me about the legend of High Brazil. Apparently, it was a very well-known legend in Ireland. When you try to approach that island, the island disappears. It was the paradise of the Celts. We make a lot of research, and we find that Galician and Portuguese sailors, they knew about that Irish legend, and very, very probably This is why when the Portuguese, they arrived to the new continent, they call Brazil. When the chieftains listen all the music, especially from the northeast of Brazil, they find very, very, very like Scottish or Irish music. So who knows if still Celtic roots in Brazil.
Since 2004, you started to tour Germany and Switzerland regularly. Would you like over here especially?
I love especially to see that the audience understands that a piper from the northwest of Spain, from Galicia, can play Irish music with the chieftains, Scottish music, Breton music, flamenco, that we have that connection of the Jacob's Weg, no? And I hope our lovely audience all over Deutschland and Switzerland, it will understand also the Brazilian Celtic connection.
When you play the German recorder, some journalists call you Rattenfänger from Hameln. When you play the gaita, some call you the Jimi Hendrix of the pipes. How do you feel about this? Is this rather a compliment or a burden?
Well, this is lovely because the Jimi Hendrix of the pipes, that comes really from the Americans when I played with the chieftains, but with rock bands like the Who or with Ray Cooder. They find that the Dudelsack, it has that rock element. Maybe the Dudelsack, it was a sort of electric guitar from the Middle Ages. But the real surprise for me in Deutschland, it was the Blockflöte, because the Blockflöte, it was my first instrument. And to play in Deutschland, to have so many friends, as Möck, as Mollenhauer, or in Switzerland, as my friends Küng, people that still making those modern instruments with the inspiration of the old Blockflöte, and the fact that they love my way of play the blockflute. I play the blockflute with a Celtic feeling, with tradition of the bagpipes. So I think something new it will happen with this instrument, which is, of course, maybe the most German of the instruments. You know, every child in Spain, all over Europe, we play the blockflute because that came from Germany.